Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a review, and I had quite the day. And it is Friday, but I worked all day basically. Spent the whole day with my daughter, who just wore me out. All day, it's one thing or the other when you have a little one. But I have been wearing this as my scent of the day today, and actually on the channel I reviewed Opus 1, Opus 2, Opus 3, Opus 4, Opus 5, Opus 6, Opus 7, Opus 8, and so, needless to say, next on the list is Opus 9, and that's exactly where we're at today. So Opus 9 with this beautifully regal red gold flecked, I don't know if you can see the gold flakes in there, but there are these sort of gold flakes built into the bottle, and I actually bought a tester because, well, why not? I mean, I don't care. The only difference really to me is that it doesn't come with the pretty little stand that some of these other Opus bottles came with, and it doesn't come with a proper Amouage cap. But other than that, who cares? It's exactly the same thing. And so I'm gonna do a fresh spray just because. But Opus 9 is well, first of all, 2 is probably too many with this one. Honestly, I mean it's a huge. I mean the key words that everyone's going to use are opulent and rich and strong, and it is all that. But this is kind of a statement maker fragrance, but not the kind of statement fragrance that maker that you're probably thinking. This is not a fragrance that you're going to wear to the office and impress your boss. I mean, unless maybe you're trying to sleep with your boss, that's different. But if you're trying to wear this, if you're looking for an office fragrance, do not get this one. Okay, this is something completely different. And it's really fascinating to me because I was thinking about sort of how many jasmine fragrances that I have in the collection, and there's really only a handful of hardcore jasmine fragrances that I have in the collection. One, I would consider Reflection Man to be one of those fragrances. And I was just thinking about sort of how Amouage has 2 out of maybe, 5 or 7 hardcore jasmine fragrances that I can kind of point to in the collection. And 2 of them are Amouage, and many of them are Arabian style fragrances. I really, really like Oud de Grande by Feel Oud. That's probably, if you said what's your favorite jasmine fragrance right now, probably be Oud de Grande. But this is up there. This is up there with one of my favorite takes on jasmine because it's such an interesting exercise in jasmine. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the time frame that this came out. This was a 2015 release, and this is one of those Opus fragrances that have not made it to the new line. So all of the new Opus bottles look like the regular Amouage bottles. The Fishman standardized everything, which I hate. I like that the library collection was different. It was set apart from the regular Amouage bottle collection, if you will. It had a different bottle. And some of these made it into the new line, like, for example, Opus 7, Reckless Leather, Opus 5, Wood Symphony. They got names, the ones that moved into the collection. These, even though Parfumo says it's still being marketed and still available, if you go to the Amouage website, you cannot find this, okay? So I'm not going to sound the alarm and say discontinued, run and go get it, but I think you kind of know what's happening. Many of these Opus fragrances, I think, are being phased out, I think. But don't quote me on that, but that's what it seems like. So came out in 2015, and 2 of my all-time favorite perfumers have collaborated to create this scent. Pierre Negrin, who created many, many of my favorite Amouages, and Nathalie Lorson, who I really rate as a perfumer, and I really wish someone like her got the in-house perfumer gig at Dior, let's say, versus Frances Kirkjohn, in my opinion. I would much rather have someone like Nathalie Lorson. I think she was forced to do a lot of things in the quote-unquote budget space, the cheaper space, where you can find some of her fragrances discounted for very, very cheap. I would just like to see what she could do at a high-end niche house, and this is her chance to kind of shine, and shine did she ever. She has done some other niche fragrances. I don't want to make it seem like she only does cheap designers, but she's known for her cheaper designer fragrances, which we'll discuss here later on in the video. But this is described as a floral animalic fragrance, okay? And so basically this opens up with one of the most dirty, in-your-face floral accords you will ever smell. I mean, Amouage is known for making bold, aggressive, challenging fragrances. And to some people, this could be like nails on a chalkboard. To others, it could be like the most beautiful jasmine you've ever smelled. And basically, what it is it's a hardcore animalic floral opening where everything hits you at once. But you get the animalic civet, you get the dirty indolic side of the jasmine. Just imagine you took this jasmine oil, and it smells very high class. It smells like you're smelling jasmine essential oil, which I'm sure you're not. I'm sure it's some sort of absolute or something a little bit cheaper, but it smells extremely high quality. And just imagine they kind of took the florals and tried to separate some of those harder, dirtier indolic notes. Some would even say fecal smelling white florals, and then doubled down on it. You know, like they almost like sifted through the jasmine, picked out the indolic parts, put them in the fragrance, and then did some more, picked out the indolic parts and put them in the fragrance, and just did it over and over and over again. Like they just sifted through it until you basically got what this is, which gives you this very dirty, very indolic jasmine. It almost has a sweet honey texture, right? Well, I take that back. It doesn't have a honey texture from the beginning. It has a little bit of a waxy texture in the beginning, okay? And then you start to get these sweeter honey notes as the jasmine begins to kind of bloom and blossom on your skin. And I would say the jasmine smells almost like 80% jasmine grandiflorum, 20% jasmine sambac, because it's one of those florals where the depth of the floral note that you're getting in the opening just seems to go on and on and on and on. And it's almost as if you can see from here to the horizon jasmine, you know, like it's just jasmine on jasmine on jasmine. And the jasmine also seems to kind of hint at some freshness to the fragrance. The floral elements naturally give a little bit of uplifting freshness, and maybe that's the 20%. I said 80 jasmine grandiflora. Maybe that's the 20% jasmine sambac, which historically is the more piercing, you know, more traditionally masculine jasmine, but also a little bit fresher smelling. Okay, but don't be fooled. Okay, there's a small piece of the fragrance that may hint to that, but this is anything but a fresh fragrance. Anything but the floral notes dominate in the opening, and I would almost venture to say that Opus 9 is one of the most animalic floral fragrances I own in my collection. Like, you know, if you made me take out fragrances that I considered to be pure animalic florals, this would be probably right towards the top of that list. And you know, it's one of my favorite parts of the fragrance. It ends up coming through as you're smelling that floral top in the opening. If you pay close attention, what you'll notice is these very subtle leathery notes start to come through, and they start to blend with this hardcore floral. Again, the dirtier parts of the jasmine, and you get almost like this leather and wax like smell that starts to come through. And so it's almost like receiving a parcel from the king back in the day, and you get like this royal seal. You know, it took the wax, they put the seal, almost like Sultan Pasha does his bottles with the wax and the seal. But it's like bound in this beautiful leather casing. So you get the wax, you get the leather, you get the florals, and it is beautiful, but very, very, very intense. Picking out some of the notes on your first wear of Opus 9 may be a little bit tough, because I almost feel like that intensity, that piercing intensity of the floral fragrance, of the floral parts of this fragrance, dominate in the sense that it's going to be maybe a little bit of a case study in patience to start to pick out some of the other notes in the opening, because the jasmine will dominate. You'll pick out the jasmine, and to me, it's almost like it drowns everything out the first couple times, because it's just so loud. The jasmine is so turned up, you know, like an amplifier turned up to, like an amp turned up to the point where it could blow. You know, it has that overwhelming type quality. But the more you wear it, multiple wears, you'll start to kind of wrap your head around it. So, as I said, jasmine dominates from the opening, but the other notes make an appearance. And in turn, when they make their entrance on stage, especially in the first hour or two, okay? First hour or two, as these notes start coming on stage, already I'm getting a little bit of the beeswax, a little bit of the leather, like I said, but they seem to almost change the way that the jasmine itself smells. So, for example, there's a note of black pepper. And if you know Nathalie Lorson's kind of backstory and what she's created, she loves using black pepper in some of her creations. For example, Bentley for Men Intense, which I have and will review on the channel. This Is Him by Zadig and Voltaire, has a black pepper note. Montana's Graphite, which I have reviewed on the channel, has a black pepper note. Spice Bomb Night Vision, which was also a Pierre Negrin and Nathalie Lorson combination, by the way, has a black pepper note. And if I had a brand, I'll tell you what, having Pierre Negrin and Nathalie Lorson work together, obviously they like working together. I could definitely get behind that if I ever had a brand. So, but when the black pepper note kind of arrives, and the leather arrives, it just seems to like morph the scent of the jasmine, if that makes sense, because the jasmine is so prominent. You know, it's such a prominent note that when you smell the black pepper and you smell the leather, it almost seems like it's changing the chemical makeup of the jasmine to just smell a little bit different, if that makes sense. And so now it becomes like a spicy jasmine. Now it becomes a leathery jasmine on your skin. It kind of goes through this phase where that jasmine-y floral accord dominates but shifts at the same time. And so all of these notes make an appearance. And the one that has the biggest pull on the way I perceive the fragrance is the beeswax note. And I mentioned it from the very beginning that I get this waxiness. It doesn't smell like beeswax from the very beginning, but it will start to smell like a beeswax note. And beeswax is an animalic ingredient. Civet's an animalic ingredient. Ambergris is an animalic ingredient. So there's, and of course the indolic side of the jasmine is animalic in and of itself. Some people say indols actually smell fecal. And there is some scientific proof to back that up. And one of the reasons I once heard a very compelling reason why white florals have to smell so powerful and so piercing. And it's because many of the colored flowers, some of the insects that go to try to pollinate the flowers, the bees especially, can see in color. And so because the white flowers may seem dull in a background of bright flowers, they need to smell extremely powerful. They need a pull. And they do that by being extremely powerful smelling. So, I mean, nature has its way, I guess, of balancing everything out. And, you know, one of the reasons I love this fragrance so much, along with the animalic note and that amazing brief sort of beeswax note right from the very beginning, is many people joke that all you have to do is put like a honey note or a beeswax note, and I love it. And there probably is some truth to that. But this is one of the most waxy smelling beeswax notes I've ever smelled, you know, and it hits you right from the beginning, and it changes and it morphs a little bit because it becomes more honeyed and stuff like that as the jasmine heats up. But it almost feels like what they did is they took the honeycomb, dumped out the honey, and then put the honeycomb on top of the jasmine flower and took a torch and just melted it. And melted the waxy part of the honeycomb onto the jasmine flower like a mesh, okay? Like if you ever see like one of those cafeteria ladies that wears that hair mesh to keep their hair in from so it doesn't get on the food, the mesh goes over the jasmine flowers in my mind. That's how I kind of foresee this waxiness. And let's talk a little bit about inspirations, because I think you kind of have an idea of the scent. You've got your mind wrapped around it, right? The civet is, of course, a part of it. You will smell the animalic, dirty, slightly pissy civet. That adds a lot of depth to the fragrance. You'll smell the ambergris, which adds warmth and this kind of mineralic touch, if you will. But the inspiration for this fragrance is very interesting, because if you go to base notes and you look, it will actually say Opus 9 is inspired by Giuseppe Verdi's opera La Traviata, which is, if you haven't watched, by the way, just on a side note, if you have never watched Marie Callas sing in La Traviata or any of her operas, I would urge you to take 10 minutes and just, you know, watch it on YouTube. It won't take you long. It is impressive. Very, very impressive. Her voice was really something. And it's maybe one of the most famous operas of all time. I think it was made like 175 years ago or something. But basically the name La Traviata translates to fallen woman. It translates to fallen woman, or it could also be like the one that went astray, which sounds like you lost a dog or something. The one who went astray. But Yes, that's basically the translation from La Traviata. Okay, and so if you look at the history of jasmine in perfumery, if you go back in the day, I mean 100 to 150 years ago, it was kind of shunned by proper women to wear an indolic fragrance like this, an indolic jasmine, if you will. And the reason was that they viewed it as like an allure for men. Like men just couldn't help themselves if you wore this jasmine fragrance. So like they would just kidnap a married woman right off the street because they smelled jasmine. I mean, we're not that bad. We're not that much of animals, are we? But yeah. So interestingly enough, married women, proper married women, were not supposed to wear jasmine. Um, it was not something that you wanted to draw attention from other men. This kind of indolic jasmine was seen as like a way to draw attention from the opposite sex, if you will. And so they weren't supposed to wear something overly indolic. Only ladies of the night or unpious women, okay, were supposed to wear such jasmine heavy scents. And so it was not something that a God fearing woman back in the day would wear. It reminds me of of Blazing Saddles. God fearing, it was not something a God fearing woman wore. And and since this scent is literally based on the fallen woman, Pierre Negrin and Nathalie Lorson and Christopher Chong, hell of a trio, Trinity trio right there. I would take that trio any day of the week. Basically made this one of the most sexualized, animalic, indolic, dirty sort of this undercurrent of society. This sort of this sort of lasciviousness comes to mind with this fragrance. So the animalic facets here, and I mean, you can think of everything from unwashed brothels to, I mean, anything you can think of that involves sins of the flesh apply to this fragrance. Okay, that's the way I would describe it. It's basically this combination of ambergris and civet that gives it this, and these very, very indolic, dirty facets of the floral notes that tend to come through. And the civet here is strong and it's heavily dosed. In fact, I would almost make the case that that it probably should be talked about more when people mention these animalic civet fragrances. Like when people talk about Koros, or they talk about Joint or Furio, or any of those challenging fragrances from the past. This easily could be on this list. I mean, this wears like a vintage fragrance. The depth and the longevity and just the way that it just pierces through the air. And we'll talk about the good and bad to that, because this is one of those fragrances that sometimes will, like if I wear it on the wrong day, like I need to go take a nap. So for those of you who are into, especially I would say late 80s masculine fragrances, so fragrances that came out from, let's say, 1987 to 90 or 91, in that range, late 80s to early 90s, mostly late 80s though, where, let's say, the floral notes were amped up. There was a stylistic shift in the late 80s where many of the masculine fragrances were really constructed very similar to old feminine fragrances from the past. They just marketed them towards men. They amped up the florals a lot in the late 1980s. And just imagine trying to kind of keep that animalic style back in the day, but with this very modern sort of aroma chemical feeling to this, this very Middle Eastern style fragrance. And so if you think about things like Akitos, let's say, by Alain Delon, or if you think about something like Tenere by Paco Rabanne, these late 80s, very floral heavy fragrances, but marketed towards men, this falls into that category. But I actually think this would smell much better on a woman who just knew she was an absolute badass. That's just my opinion. But I have no problem wearing it. Okay, and I love this stuff. But I do think if you had like a spectrum, I think most people would say this leans just a little bit feminine. But there are some masculine notes which pull it back, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But so I think it's completely unisex, but I would say it leans just slightly feminine. But the opera itself, basically imitates this bourgeois heroine as a fallen woman who actually earns redemption. So the woman earns redemption through sacrifice, which, believe it or not, in the mid 1800s when this was written, was kind of a novel concept, and many of the censors did not want to allow it whenever the opera was written at first. Now, there is a second part to this concept that I really love. And if you follow the channel, you probably know because I've told this story many a times on different live streams and stuff like that. But if you know your fragrance history, you'll love this story as well. But let me read you the actual original blurb because I happen to have some of the original samples, which this is what the original Opus line samples look like. Look at that. I think it's badass. And so they came like this. They come with a gold cap, which is just freaking cool. And they come with a booklet. So that was what an original Amouage Opus sample looked like. I mean, hell of a sample. For all of the shit I've given some of the other companies samples, that is how you do a sample, ladies and gentlemen. And you even get a booklet with your sample. And so this one says, here's the full breakdown. Here, I'll even read you the library collection part. Inspired by the omniscient allure of a library, this collection is a celebration of integrity, creativity, and virtuosity, a place where the soul leaves an imprint of the art of living. The Amouage Library Collection is a poetic homage to an olfactory exploration. And this is the particular one. Inspired by La Traviata, Opus 9 is a soulful interpretation of the camellia flower. Okay, so if you actually look at the box, which I don't have because well, I have a tester, so it didn't come with a proper box, but the box is beautiful. It's maybe one of the most beautiful in the entire Opus line. Actually, and the bottle is one of the most beautiful with this lipstick red with these flecks of gold that probably won't get picked up on by the camera, but they're there. And so there's this kind of like camellia flower that almost looks like it's gone through the washing machine, okay? Like it's cut and beat up and downtrodden and all this stuff. And then the other side of the box is the most beautiful camellia flower you've ever seen, you know, in full bloom, in full glory, full regal glory. And so there's this concept you can see of fallen and redemption, right? And so if you notice on the blurb, they talk about how the camellia flower is their interpretation, a soulful interpretation of the camellia flower. And the reason is, and this is per the Fragrance Society, but they say, as any gardener will tell you, camellias don't smell. It's the leaves which can be distilled. The resulting oil is very high in a chemical called eugenol, so maybe very clove-like from the leaves, but in perfumery, it features more often as what's known as a fantasy note, okay? So this camellia flower note that they're trying to create, in this case, is a synthetic fantasy note. So they say it is designed to conjure up images of soft, voluptuous beauty of the winter blossoming shrub. Camellia is also related to the tea plant, interestingly enough. Sometimes then it's paired with other tea-like ingredients, but more to paint an olfactory picture in marketing terms than for any real other real reason. That doesn't detract, though, from camellia's soft, voluptuous beauty. Voluptuous is a hell of a name for this. This would smell amazing on a voluptuous lady, I'll tell you that. So they wanted to give their interpretation of this mute flower. And so basically, there are some folks that say camellia does have some smell, just like there are some people that say a fern has a smell, although, you know, we say that they don't. But I guess everything technically has a smell, even if it doesn't. You could say it has some sort of a smell to you, but some people have said that camellia is supposed to have this very soft, velvety rose, okay, like smell, but it's extremely soft and extremely quiet, even softer than peony, which I reviewed a peony fragrance very recently by Amouage called Diamant, interestingly enough. And, you know, if you think back to the history of Amouage, many of Amouage's fragrances had these big floral elements. Think of Amouage Gold, even Gold Man, the men's version, big floral, big old school masculine floral. There's so many old Amouages that used florals and frankincense or smoke or something along those lines. And so this is right in the Amouage wheelhouse with what they were trying to do here. And Camellia, just some other points on the flower. They say it's used in Chinese art, literature, poetry. It represents beauty, purity, and faithfulness. Faithfulness. So for the fallen woman, it's supposed to represent faithfulness. Okay, so it is often worn as an ornament in Japanese cultures to tea ceremonies. It's related to the tea flower, as I said. Um, and so basically, in general, the flower is associated with love, affection, and admiration and faithfulness. Okay, so the fragrance is really, for me, Opus 9, the fragrance goes in such an interesting direction because just like there is this revival in the opera. So, like I said, watch Marie Callas sing. It's absolutely beautiful. But the way I described the opening, how it just seems like the jasmine is in focus, right? And maybe the woman's sins are in focus in this little tale in the first couple of hours. But what happens is the fragrance kind of works slowly and changes over time, almost like hard day by day change, right? And as you go to the dry down, all of a sudden you notice that I've got a dry down here and this stuff lasts all day. I mean, literally, you could, that spray I did, if you sprayed it in the morning, you'd be able to smell it at night. I think you would. It's an all day fragrance for me. But you notice as it dries down, less and less of the jasmine. Okay, so basically, what happens is this combination of beeswax, guaiac wood, and animalics mixed with a little bit of vetiver in the base, which sort of acts like oak moss, kind of affixing it to your skin. You know, same role as oak moss in old school fragrances. Acts as a fixative and has a little bit of the soily, earthy texture. But there's a few notes that add this hint of smoke. So even though there's no frankincense in here, this is an amouage. I mean, come on. So there's earthy vetiver, earthy smoky vetiver, and guaiac wood. Okay, so guaiac wood, and I always said guaiac wood for the longest time because it's easier to say, but technically it is guaiac wood. It's supposed to be this wood that smells like rubbery, burning, medicinal, tobacco-ish hints with almost like this birch smell. You know, birch is used often in smoky leathers and stuff like that. And guaiac wood is often described as having this barbecued wood, or like you threw some wood on a campfire or something. You know, it has that charred feeling to it. And basically what happens in the second act of this fragrance is that it's totally reborn. You can still see the same fragrance from the first couple hours, just like you could see the same woman from when she was the fallen woman. And you can only imagine what she did to get that nickname. I'm not going to put out any ideas, but leave that in the comments. What she did to become the fallen woman. But even though you can see it's the same woman, obviously the aura, the vibe, the way she holds herself and presents herself, the way she dresses, the makeup of the person, almost at like a molecular level, feels like it's changed. She's a totally reborn person. And she wouldn't do the things she used to do because she's a completely different person on the inside. Even though she looks the same, you still carry your same face around, right? On the outside, she's a totally different person on the inside. That is the best way I can describe Opus 9. The shift from the first half of the fragrance to the second half of the fragrance. You can see the jasmine, the hardcore jasmine opening. You can see the waxiness. You can see all that. But the guaiac wood and some of the other notes in here add this filter that really makes it feel like it has gone through a transformation, but you can still see where it came from, right? The beautiful camellia flower on one side, the ugly, downtrodden, looks like it went through the washing machine camellia on the other, right? It almost has gone through this spirit of reconciliation, if you will. So in closing, a couple points. First is that sometimes, and I alluded to this in the review, but sometimes this fragrance gives me a headache, and a bad one, like a real bad one. Like there's a handful of fragrances in my collection that I know if I wear it, I have a chance to get a headache. And it's not a lot. I'll tell you what, I have become very resistant to headaches because I spray stuff all the time, all day, every day now. This is one where sometimes it happens. And so I say that just to say it's extremely powerful stuff. And if you are an oversprayer like me, and I am a notorious oversprayer, um, and it just turns into one of those headache days, maybe that's why they call them heady florals, huh? But I mean, you'll literally smell this all day. It's in reapplication. Forget about it. You don't have to reapply this. It's literally like the old days of perfumery. You don't have to carry around a decant. This is a one application, set it and forget it type fragrance for me. But the headache issue is, something that I do think about with this. If I'm at home and I can just take a nap or something, like today I worked from home, it was fine. And it didn't really hit me today. I never got that hardcore headache, which this has given me in the past. And this feeling of being in a story, this feeling of this fragrance telling you something, the opera imagery, the reconciliation imagery, this revival imagery is huge with this fragrance. And going back to something about I really love about Opus 9, I love the smell. I mean, there's very few jasmine fragrances which I would say I love the smell of. I have learned that I really like jasmine essential oil. Um, Russian Adam very kindly sent me some jasmine grandiflorum and jasmine sambac, and smelling them, you can go watch my 50 ingredient list video. It's under the Russian Adam playlist. You'll find it, where I smell every single ingredient he sent me and talk about it. And jasmine in and of itself is just such a beautiful note, but many times they don't capture it properly because I don't feel like they're using high quality materials, right? I feel like many of these houses are trying to get away with creating some sort of like jasmine accord or like a white floral accord that ends up smelling like a gardenia or something. This is a proper jasmine accord. And it has the pedigree, it has the ingredients standing behind it, but it also has the story. And the olfactive narrative that this fragrance tells, I would say, is really something. It takes you back to the start of modern perfumery because I'm reminded of Houbigant's Fougère Royale, which I have a decant of, and I will review that one of these days. Now, granted, it is a newer, like the recreated one that Roja Dove and um, Rodrigo Flores Rue did together, okay, since 2010. But the first Fougère was created by Houbigant in the late 1800s, and the whole idea was to create a fragrance that smelled like a fern. Well, ferns have no smell. I mean, Fougère as a category literally means fern-like. And so this artistic idea of man creating something where nature has created something with no smell, and we're going to give it a smell. I love that imagery. Russian Adam did it with Ocularia blossom. It was supposed to be the blossom on an oud tree. Well, ouds don't have a blossom like that, but I love that sort of artistic venture, and this does that. This recreation of the camellia flower, a mute flower. I mean, how beautiful! There's so many places you can take this in your head, and maybe that's just me geeking out, nerding out on perfumery, but the camellia flower as a mute smell, and what they've done as an artistic exercise. Bravo to Nathalie Lorson and Pierre Negrin. Now, I have heard this fragrance referred to as a bad bitch fragrance by one of the reviewers, and it stuck with me because, for my intents and purposes, this smells like a celebratory fragrance. Like, if you worked your whole life to make it to the NFL and you signed your first contract and you were going to go out on the town with your signing bonus for the very first time, this would be a perfect pick for that sort of situation. If you were going to go on New Year's Eve and go to a party where everyone's got hats on and they're hugging you and kissing you and spilling champagne, and it's that kind of atmosphere, this would work perfect. If you're going to wear this to work, like I said, unless your intention is more than just going to the office, I would probably avoid this because there is this hardcore animalic, primal, sexualized feeling to this fragrance. And I still think that the way the jasmine is used in here would probably work much better on a bad bitch, if you will. Although as a guy, I have no problem pulling this off. But some men may smell this and if you don't like white florals, like my brother Rich Mitch from across the pond, you may smell this and literally break into a cold sweat or run across the room. But I think Amouage knocked it out of the park with this, and it's there will be some more Opus reviews, but it feels like, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of some of the hardcore old school Opus. I have a sample of Opus 10, which is next. Of course, after Opus 9, go figure, Opus 10. I have a sample of that thanks to my Amouage Sugar Mama, Allie. And I'm now just finding the sample is going to be hard, but it is up there somewhere. So I will continue on my Opus reviewing list, and then when I'm done, the plan is to come back and do an Opus line ranking, which I think will be very cool because there's so many of these now. But it feels like we're coming up on sort of the end of an era. This sort of signifies a change in Amouage in 2015. So I'm kind of sad. I'm a little bit sad. There's still more Opus reviews to come, but it feels like all of the old school hardcore Opus fragrances are now in the rearview mirror, but they're all on the channel. They're all on the Amouage playlist. You can check it out. If you have any experience with Opus 9, do let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So as always, love these Amouage reviews. Love doing them for you guys. One of my favorite houses of all time, at least back when Christopher Chong had the reins. I still think Amouage needs to just bite the bullet and hire him back. Just give him whatever the fuck he wants, okay? Just come back, on crawling on your knees, begging for forgiveness. But I know they're making a shitload of money with the crap they're putting out now, but I miss this. I miss this version of Amouage. And it's sad that it just feels like it's in the rearview mirror. But maybe there'll be a revival one day. Maybe it'll have its own reconciliation story. So anyways, that's my thought. As always, appreciate everyone watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, all the stuff I usually don't talk about. When I say the word subscribe, does the stupid little subscribe button light up on your YouTube thing? I don't know. But anyways, as always, thanks for watching. Cheers. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.